Resumed by Snowspider. Chapter 4. Found. Peter didn't know what was wrong with the New Yorkers, but all of them, or the few that came out of their houses that morning, looked sad. Ignoring the almost empty streets, Peter walked past many closed shops, all of their signs saying similar things: closed for mourning, open tomorrow again. Peter was starting to worry about the people. What big thing could have happened to upset so many people? Peter's mind couldn't conjure up anything, but he was determined to get to the bottom of this only after, locating his suit. Peter continued after taking the subway, finally reaching about the location of Ada Becker's house. The only problem was that the whole area was surrounded by orange police tape, and there were still quite a few people standing around, including news reporters and police officers. Peter chose to bite the bullet after seeing a red paint splash in the centre of the orange tape, and tapped one of the reporters on the shoulder. "Was Spider-Man's suit not here a while ago?" The reporter looked at him teary-eyed. "Yeah, man, but Tony Stark took it late last night." Before the man could finish, Peter was already doing a mad dash to the tower. He was so glad Mr. Stark had found the suit, but on the other hand, that probably meant Mr. Stark was really mad. Peter did break Karen, although he was sure she could be fixed, and made the suit really filthy, and don't forget the small tear in the side. Peter picked up his running. He just had to take the subway and then sort everything out with Mr. Stark. Easy. Tony was, meanwhile, busy with an early morning press conference. It seemed that everyone who possibly could was attending. News reporters were crowded on top of each other, each in either way he looked. Pepper, although still looking sad, gave him a small smile of encouragement. Tony swallowed thickly before glancing down at his note cards and then at the audience. "Nothing is set in place so far, but at the moment we are thinking and calculating the best approach to the situation as we speak. For now," Tony was cut off by one of the reporters yelling out, "We want a funeral!" After that one guy, many others joined into the screaming, and a lot of hands went up. Tony threw out a stop motion before continuing. "I get this is an upsetting situation, but like I already said, we are working on it. Now I'm entitled to give close family and beloved ones a chance to recoup and talk about the next steps. The person under the mask was, after all, dear to them." The shouting started again. "Do you know Spider-Man personally? Are you going to reveal his identity to the world? Who was he to you?" Tony cleared his throat roughly. "Spider-Man was my son in everything but blood. His identity is a sensitive matter, and at the moment we are considering it." Tony finished his part of the speech and made his way down the stage and out of view of the public. Everyone was screaming at him to answer more and more questions, but Tony ignored them. The press conference was done. Pepper smiled at him as he wandered past, but Tony didn't quite manage to return it. He used his last energy to put a facade on. He was done. He had to stop a small purse-snagging crime on the way and grab some lunch. Cereal didn't ever last him very long, and Peter was pushing it already by skipping his morning snack. Another thing Tony didn't need to necessarily know. Walking into SI, Peter was once again hit with the same wave of sadness and depression. The lady at the desk lifted her head to look at him with some red-rimmed eyes and even a small sniffle. As Peter showed his card, the woman nodded briefly before starting to say, "You even saved my baby once, you know. I just can't think he's gone." Peter patted the woman's shoulder before making his way to the elevator. He didn't really know what to say to her. Maybe she had a bad breakup or something, and if Peter was being honest, that was definitely not something he specialized in. Emotions. Peter made his way into the elevator. "Hi, Friday. How are you today? Would you take me to Tony's lab, and don't tell him I'm here. I want it to be a surprise." Friday sounded a bit off if Peter was being honest, but she still responded. "Of course, Peter. I'm fine, thanks for asking. Would I inquire about your health? Recent events would suggest your vitals to be low." Peter furrowed his brow in confusion. "I'm fine, Friday. I'm more healed up from last night's activities." The AI remained silent, and Peter spent the rest of the ride in his own thoughts. At least, with the speedy elevator involved, that didn't take nearly as long as Peter was hoping. and the doors opened. Peter stared wide-eyed at Mr. Stark, who was slumped over his work table. A bottle of wine stood embraced in his grasp loosely. A quarter of it was already missing. Peter's eyes went even wider. Did something happen? Peter slipped into the room, and although he was hovering right behind the man, Tony didn't lift his head in response. Peter didn't want to scare him accidentally by placing a hand on his shoulder, so instead he whispered, in case Mr. Stark was supporting a headache. Mr. Stark? The man still didn't lift his head. He just let out a low sob. Peter took a step back. Maybe this was a job Mrs. Potts was more equipped to handle. Peter bumped into a lone tool that lay fallen on the ground. It made an unusual loud sound due to the lab's quietness. That was a first, too. Peter was used to the constant flow of music whenever he visited. Every way, the sound finally got a reaction out of the man. Tony looked around himself in confusion. Who's there? Well, that was until his eyes met Peter's. Something seemed to happen, and the man burst out sobbing. Peter felt panic settle in his chest. His own frantic voice filled the air. Mr. Stark, I'm so sorry. What's wrong? I should probably go, right? Or I could get Miss Potts. Peter's ranting didn't seem to help anything, and if Peter was being honest, it seemed to be making it worse. How much should I drink? I can see him and hear him, and he looks fine. No wounds, no blood. Since when are my hallucinations so nice? Mr. Stark, Peter questioned, walking towards the man again. Tony looked so sad, but also happy to see him. Peter put a shaking hand on his shoulder, and Tony shuddered out a wince. What do you mean? I'm fine, really, see? Peter demonstrated a backflip and landed perfectly, although he did step on the same tool as before, and again it clinks and clanks under his shoe. Peter wobbled slightly, but remained standing. Tony cocked his head to the side. Friday, can hallucinations get injured? I do believe so, depending on the subject's imagination. Peter's mouth fell open in shock. Mr. Stark, I'm not a hallucination, he whined in an upset tone. I don't know how to prove that to you. Kid, calm down. I know, baby. I was just messing with you. You made me think you were dead, Peter, for almost 18 hours. Mr. Stark took a deep breath. I think I need a hug, Pete, and a thorough examination and injury check. But first, hug. Peter stood still with his mouth hanging agape until Tony's arms wrapped around his tired body. Peter was feeling so confused, but he might have realized where the mistake came in. He clearly forgot to let Tony know he was staying at Ned's the night before. But all of this could have been avoided if he even just told Ned to the extent of his injuries. Then Mr. Stark would know, and seemingly everyone in New York. He guessed that explained all the closed shops and sad faces. Oh no! What about May? She probably also thought he was dead. I'm sorry, can we just blame it on the concussion? Peter mumbled against Tony's chest, but the man pulled him to arm's length. Peter Benjamin Parker Stark, you mean to tell me you did a backflip with a concussion? What about that huge blood loss and stab wound? Tony sounded angry, but at least most of it consisted of worry about his well-being. What major blood loss? It was really more of a graze than a stab. Oh, the red paint. That wasn't my blood, Peter hurriedly assured, trying for a sideways smile. Kid, not that I don't feel better knowing you don't need a major blood transfusion, but whose blood was that? Peter laughed. No one's. It was red paint. That's also what fried Karen. Can I fix her? Tony closed his eyes for a few moments before nodding, dazed. Sure, kid. Let's just inform everyone of you rising from the dead first, shall we? Later that day. Peter was snuggled up under a comfy quilt on the living room couch. His head rested lightly on Tony's shoulder, and his hand embraced in May's. Pepper was just as close by, seated next to Tony. Pete, although on the opposite sofa, was smiling at the small family. After another batch of fresh crying and a long explanation from Peter, they were all comfortable and watching a movie. Peter was unfortunately warned that the next time he pulled such a stunt, he'd be grounded until he was 30. Peter did apologise profusely, though, and was let off the hook. Peter yawned before saying, Maybe you should give Ned your number, Mr. Stark. He knew I was alive the whole time. Way ahead of you, kid. We should schedule another press conference to reveal Spider-Man is alive. Otherwise, the public will quite literally hold a funeral, especially now that Peter is grounded from Spider-Manning for a week, Pepper added. Peter did forget to mention that slight punishment, didn't he? Pony smiled at either one of them in turn. Yay, but first, some family movie time. Oh, and kid, you did remember to tell your scary girlfriend about you being okay, right? Peter gulped nervously. He did not. Ned could probably handle that.